our wonderful guest right now is the fabulous Vince Redmond. Vince, tell them what your official job is here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I know it's changed.
There's an official job?
I know it changes from time to time.
A little bit of everything?
You do a little bit of everything, truly.
Right now, I am the Regional Director and Director of Family Services for CARD.
Okay, wonderful. So the Director of Family Services for CARD, that seems like a pretty broad thing, but you carry some different titles.
Right.
And you have, over the years, you started here as a therapist, is that correct?
Yeah,
and
almost 20 years ago.
Wow. And you are featured in the film Recovered, which is about 4 kids who ultimately recovered.
I was really young then.
Yes, you were very young.
I was very young in that picture, in that film.
But made quite a difference in some lives as a young man. And you've continued to work in the field of autism, and you are also a marriage and family therapist.
Correct.
A lot of things going on there that are of use to us.
Yes. My head is always running. Never stops moving.
Well, we love that because, as a parent on this journey, I have always said, there's the child's journey, which cannot be denied and is huge, but the whole family has to go on the journey. And the extended family and the support system, everybody has to go on this journey, and it's a stressful one for everyone. In fact, our entire topic this week is managing stress. And you're able to look at it from both sides and really see the whole full picture.
Right.
And
that's the thing. And we've always said, and one of the things I've always said is autism is a family disorder. It's not an individual disorder because the family has to change as well. There's a lot of growing, there's a lot of bereaving, there's a lot of, grief, there's a lot of, tragedy, there's a lot of work to be done. And any time there's work to be done, there's stress and there's anxiety. And all our services, for better or for worse, have been for the kids. And it's been fantastic, world renowned for our ABA services, but we need to continue to support the families as well. We need to consider, support moms and dads and the siblings and grandmas, grandpas, nannies, everyone that's involved in the family, because it's the family unit that has to be able to support, to nurture, and to be able to grow the child with autism.
Absolutely. And we should say, too, because a lot of our families, I know they would say, well, we all understand that there's the stress and there's the grief, that there is room for and is often a great deal of joy. And especially when we make room for it, there's room for more joy, too. And I think that's what we'd all like to get to as much as possible. I've asked you to come today to talk about a couple of subjects that are really difficult to talk about, right? When and
you usually
how.
Pull me in for those topics.
Yes, I know that you're the guy. We're going to talk about something that's difficult to get a handle on. Let's bring Vincent. So want to talk a little bit about how and when we talk to our kids about autism. And I know it's a broad subject, but you've seen a lot of things over the years. And then I want to talk about, how do we tell other people and when do we tell other people? Is there any rule of thumb for a parent to follow for if they should tell their child you have a diagnosis with autism?
I think the only rule of thumb that I can think of, and there's really nothing written, is just, is it going to benefit the child?
Okay.
I think a lot of decisions have been made by families and school district professionals and so forth, is what is going to be best for them. Maybe it's going to ease the family's anxiety or the parent's anxiety, but it might not necessarily be the best for the child because maybe they don't want people to know, or maybe they're not ready for it, or maybe they don't understand it, or what have you. So I think the rule of thumb that I would tell parents is that if it's going to benefit the child, then I would say it would probably be okay. But if it's to benefit somebody else, then maybe it's not a good idea to disclose.
Okay, so looking at your intention in disclosing it. And we talked about this a little before in the break about how different things for different families and different kids too. Our kids are all different.
In different levels. I mean, some kids, you don't need to talk to them about it because they won't understand. They won't understand they're different. They don't see that they're different, and that's fine. That's great. Let it be. But as kids get older and kids get more competent, they at times can tell that something's different. And that's where we have to start then talking as going back to family, as a family unit, what are we going to do? When are we going to say it, and what are we going to say? Because as they start to feel different, they need an explanation on why. They can't just feel different and everybody pretend that everything's okay.
Yeah.
So if they're aware of it, that's a good sign that it's going to be time to start talking about it.
Okay. So really important when they start to notice those differences, that's a really good time. I know for us as a family, you know, one of the things that really cheesed me off big time in the beginning was that I felt like something was going on with my child and I couldn't put my finger on it, but of course autism was something that had come up in my mind. And I remember early on saying to somebody, do you think, you know, he might have autism? And I didn't ask the right person, of course, but I asked, you know, friends and family. They would, no, you're completely overreacting. No, no, no. And what I found out eventually when I finally came out of denial and said, you know, I think we have something going on with our child, and we got him tested, and then we told some of those people, and they're like, oh, well, we didn't want to say anything to you, but we were talking amongst ourselves, and we really felt 6 months ago. And I was so mad for a while that people were talking about my child and about the fact that I was in denial and weren't sharing it with me, those were the people I didn't talk to for a while. I've since gotten over it a little. But I was mad. I was mad. And I kind of had a knee-jerk reaction that I didn't want anybody else to be talking about what was happening with him behind his back without him knowing it. It just affronted me. So we made this knee-jerk reaction that we were going to talk to him about it from day one, and it was just always a part of the conversation. There have been some times when I have been glad of that, and of course other times when I have had misgivings about that. I'm glad that he knows and he talks about it on a regular basis. Because he's had it from minute
and he
one.
Can handle it.
Even when he couldn't understand it, it was just words that we used. We never, you know, I can remember going into doctor's office and they were used euphemisms and things and said, well, I said, you call it what it is. You're not going to talk about it when you leave the room about him. You say it in front of him. But it was an emotional reaction. I don't think I was stopping to, in that moment. In that time. I didn't go through your litmus test of saying, wait a minute, who is this for? I think it was more for me and my personal outrage. But, you know, for families, they have to weigh that the decision that they make, you can't go back once you've told them. That's true.
I mean, it's out there. I mean, my first reaction, just real quick, based on what happened to you, is that you should be angry. I mean, because the people you love, the people you trust, should be the ones that can sit down with you and say, we're concerned. Why don't you look it up? Maybe they're not professionals. They don't know, but they can say, hey, we got some concerns. And I think I would be angry, too, if the people I trust the most were talking about me and my family, but not bringing it forward to me. So, I mean, first off, I'll justify your anger. So there you go.
I appreciate it.
I think it was.
Did you hear that? Those of you who know who you are.
It was okay. But again, I think, you know, when to talk about it and when not to talk about it is a very personal, as you said. It's a very personal and it's a very, you know, it's a very individual decision. The key to it is making it together, making it with your husband, making it with the other family members, siblings, and so forth, because they too have to live their lives with it. The siblings that go to school, kids ask questions. Why is your brother like that? Why is your sister like that? They need to have an answer. They need to have some type of retort to be able to say, oh, he's autistic, or he's special needs, or whatever we want to call it. You know. He has a learning disability or he has a speech disability. It doesn't matter what the label is. It's just so that other kids understand that he has different needs than they do and they can act appropriately. And I think that's something we often forget. We often forget about everybody else's reaction in the family to what, you know, what our child has or doesn't have or whatever the diagnosis is. So when he has, you know, we're focused on when to tell him. It's also important to make sure that the family knows what to say when other people ask. So if you get asked, you know, like you said, you're up front and say, he's autistic, no problem, this is the way it is, and you've accepted that, which I think is fantastic. Other families, they don't like the word. The word scares them, or the word, it just strikes too much fear in their heart. So he's special needs. That's fine. Whatever.
And I think it's important what you're saying is find the language for your family, because we don't say autistic. My son, if you say autistic, he says, I am not autistic. I have autism. You know, and he's very adamant about that. And I think you got to find, and I know other friends that say, I don't want you to say I have autism, say I am autistic. That's so everybody has their words, but find your words.
Find your comfort zone and use the words, just don't deny it. Just don't hide it meanings that everything's okay.
Right.
Everybody sees it's not. I mean, and I think that's the denial stage. That's the early stages of grieving. And as you know, and all of the families know, you go through a grieving process.
Yes.
The minute it's diagnosed, the minute you see that something's wrong with your baby, your precious, your gem, we know at that point grieving is going to start.
Yeah.
And what's the one the one of the phases of grieving is denial.
Yeah.
And that's where we go and we try to pretend that everything's okay,
Yes.
or that it's going to get better, or it's going to get over, and this isn't going to be the journey that is as it is.
Yeah.
And very natural, very understanding. But at that point, we need to that's when the discussion needs to be, well, how are we going to classify this? What is the definition? What are we going to do as a family to be able to proceed forward? Is it autism? Is it special needs? Is it speech delayed?
Differently
whatever.
abled. Some people just say differently able. He's differently abled. It's whatever. However, I think that words have huge power.
Oh yeah.
And how you choose to label things says a lot about how you're going to feel about it later on.
What is a new one? Ability challenged or something like that, or
I think differently abled.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of new ones come down that, like you said, they're very affirming, very powerful, very, very optimistic.
Right.
So that the person who hears that, they feel optimistic, and the person who is it also feels optimistic.
We started after, because we said has autism, and then we started saying is actively recovering from autism.
That's
because
good.
on a daily basis he's doing that, and boy, we cause a stir. You'll say that to somebody, and they go, "What does that mean? Is there such a thing as recovery from autism?" And I say, "You betcha there is."
Recovering alcoholics, recovering drug addicts, recovering from depression. Why not?
And I always say, what else would you call it when they have a diagnosis and they progress to the point where they no longer have it? What else?
Right.
You got another word? Tell me.
Right. If you get a better phrase, just go for it.
He is working towards recovery.
Yeah.
And
no,
continues to. So, and that made me happy inside.
Right.
I liked that term. And my husband and I both said, okay, this is what works for us.
Right.
But I think everybody has their own choices, just like everybody has their own choice whether to disclose to other people that their child has autism. And this is a really personal decision.
Sure, and I think that's where a lot of the social, nuances come in social, social rules. It's like, who do I tell, who don't I tell? Obviously, we have our nuclear family that we were talking about, or our extended family. But when is it okay to go outside of that? Obviously, school and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and soccer and baseball and softball and all those kind of things. What do we tell them? What we don't? Again, I think by the rule of thumb is it what is going to be in the benefit of the child? Does the soccer coach need to know that he's autistic so that he can appropriately make sure he blends into the team? Possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, I know
cases,
I've coached, a child that had autism. It was on the spectrum on my soccer team with typically developing kids, and it was good that I knew.
Yeah.
Because I was able to be a little bit more patient, be a little bit more understanding, be a little bit more. Adapt things a little bit better so that he'd be able to be successful, feel confident, feel blended in, feel like he's having a good job or he's doing a good time. But sometimes some kids, they're very aware of it and they don't want anybody to know because they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be different.
Or be treated differently.
Which is a great sign. Let me point that out. That's fantastic because that's the stage of development you want them to be. You don't want them to feel different. They want to blend. The fact that they're understanding other people's perspectives and they're understanding how other people are looking at them,
that's progress.
Is huge, and that's what we want. I had a boy who was in his early teens, and he was asked to do a TV interview, and it was a whole spot on autism, and I was up there, and Mom did her thing, and they asked, do you want to be on TV? And he's all, no. And we thought it was just emotions and just shy. And he goes, I don't want anybody to know.
Right.
And I thought that was fantastic.
Yes.
It was great because
that's a real healthy
it was
sign.
a huge sign that he was aware that he was different, but he didn't want to be different. And he was going to do everything he could to blend in. And he was aware that what people could or might think when the word autism comes up. So again, that's a different situation where it might be best to not say anything. Let him blend in. Maybe use, he's trying the best that he can, or he's going to give it his best effort. Sometimes he lacks in this, or however we want to frame it. But that might be a situation where it's best not to say anything because they're more aware of it. I think, again, like we said, it's very individualized based on the situations. But again, what's going to be in the child's best interest? What's going to be in the best interest at that time? Because that can change 5 minutes later.
And you don't get to take it back. I mean, that's really, a lot of times I'll talk to parents and they'll sheepishly say to me, we don't let people know. and they think that I'm going to judge them because we've been very open and out there from day one, and partially because of what I said. And that once you've opened it up, it's like there's no putting it back in the closet. It's out there, right? And I saw very early on that there was a certain amount. My son loves attention, absolutely loves attention. Anytime there's a camera and they want to interview him, he is thrilled. He said to me once on a Saturday morning, I said, "What do you want to do today?" We didn't have therapy. This was a good 3 years ago when he was still in pretty much intensive therapy. But we didn't have therapy on a Saturday. I said, "What would you like to do today?" And he goes, "Well, I'd like to set up a table somewhere and sign autographs." That's my kid, right?
Nice.
Loves to be in the public spotlight, absolutely loves that. So I didn't have any qualms about that. It's changing now that he's getting a little bit older, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Becoming a little more aware.
But I never judge when parents make the decision and say, we're not going to disclose, because there have been a couple of times that I have disclosed and it has bitten my child on their rear end.
Right.
And that I've said, and I kind of pick and choose now. Like, he's at camp right now today, and we have not disclosed to the camp because I did not see the need to.
Right. There's no need.
And, I guess they could go online and look him up and see it, so I don't know what big secret I think I'm keeping, but chances are they're not gonna.
Right.
And that they're not gonna realize that there's something different. And so more and more, it's not our conversation opener anymore.
Right. Anymore, right.
It was for a lot of years.
But I think that's a good point. It evolves. When to bring it up evolves. I mean, some, where it might be different when they're 4, 5, 6 years old versus when they're 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
Completely different situations, different stages of development, and different social opportunities and activities that they're going to be involved in. So I think, again, when to bring it up and when not, again, it's as variable as possible, but I think it changes as developmental stages go along as well.
I think that's an important thing for me to remember, because we haven't gotten to the teen years, and I can only imagine. We had Nick Yates in the other day talking, and, when Nick was a teenager, he said, I do not want to be known as Nick who used to have autism anymore. Right. I'm done with that.
He just wants to be Nick.
I just want to be Nick. Right. I just want to be Nick. Now, in his early 20s, he's come around. He's coming around to this idea that he says, I feel like I want to help out. Right. And as somebody who was in this position and is in the position that I am now, if there's something that I can do to help, then I'm going to, which I just admire greatly. Right. Because I see that it is a cost to him to disclose, and that he doesn't always disclose, but that occasionally he will step in front of our cameras and say, yep, one time I had autism, but that's a footnote in my life at this point.
And again, that's a perfect example of, phase of life's going through development. First, it was a badge of embarrassment, because I don't want to be that. I want to be my own person. I don't want to be labeled by that. But as he's getting older, he's now seeing it as a badge of honor. Yeah. It's like, absolutely. I overcame this. Yeah. I want people to know this because it can give hope and inspiration to other people. Similar as you would be with anybody overcoming something, either it be an illness or a disability or a disorder. If they've overcome it, yes, you're going to go through a period where you just want to disassociate. You don't want to be known as the person with, that overcame depression or overcame autism or overcame alcoholism. You don't want that connection. But as time goes by and you see how you can be an inspiration, or you see how you can help other people, oftentimes then they'll wear it with the badge of honor. Like, I overcame this, you can too. Yeah. Let's do this. And I think Nick's a prime example of that, where he reaches out to try to help now. I mean, he's called me several times, like, what offices can I come and talk to the families about? Right. And it's no longer Nick who had autism. It's just this young adult who wants to speak to other young adults to be able to help them out. Right. Who just happened to overcome it. It's kind of a side note. Right. It is. They're just more excited that he's there to do it in reaching out and giving this opportunity to their families. Yeah. And I think that's fantastic. He's amazing. And again, there's Jana and a lot of the other kids out there are doing the same thing. Yeah. They disassociate at times because they want to be their own people, but yet they're also reaching out to know that if they could do it, everybody, many other kids can too. Yes,
absolutely. Well, a wonderful thing. So when we're deciding about when to disclose and when not to, we're thinking about what is in the child's best interest. How much of it is what is in the best interest for the parent? Is that any part of it?
Well, I mean, again, I couldn't, I'm not into absolute, so it'd be hard to say that it's never appropriate or it's always appropriate. But I think, again, if we're talking rules of thumb, sure, there's times where it might not be appropriate to for the parents to mention it at the time based on, again, is it going to create more of an uproar? Is it going to create gossip? Is it going to create some type of negative experience for the parents? Okay, understood that selfish reason is appropriate and is very worthy.
Yeah.
But I think those situations, are far less than the opportunities that come up that benefit the child.
Yeah. I just am thinking in terms of, there have been a couple of instances where there have been very high profile people who decided not to disclose, and there were people in our community who judged. And I would ask everybody to remember that, there's a child at stake too,
Right.
and that in some instances there have been parents who've come forward, high profile people, and been in support groups and shared.
Right.
And I think for the most part, everybody understands it's a little bit like a 12-step meeting that
Right.
you don't disclose.
This isn't something, right?
Right. This isn't something to be shared with other people, because it's the individual right of a parent.
Sure.
And that they should be the ones to get to decide whether they disclose what their child's status
Right.
is. I was thinking about a friend of mine, that not celebrity status, but she had a plan about when she was going to disclose to her son. She didn't feel that he was ready yet.
Right.
But for her individual, she had a group, a community in which she had clearly disclosed herself as a parent of a child on the autism spectrum.
Right.
There was another parent, also a parent of a child on the autism spectrum, who was very open with her child and disclosed to that child and her neurotypical child that this other woman's child had autism.
Right.
And of course, the first parent was horrified and thought, but your neurotypical child is going to say something to my child, and the one thing I don't want is for this information to come from one of his peers.
Right. Right.
And so she kind of felt like her hand was forced, and that she had to have the talk before. Right. I don't know what, and I'd be interested in your opinion about parents sharing other children's status with their children, and to be careful and considered about that.
Well, I think that's a good discussion to have with them. Is this something we're going back to how we're going to phrase it? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? It's doing it as a family, not just mom doing it and then hoping that the other kids don't say anything, or mom saying things and then hoping everybody else's kids don't say anything. I mean, if it's out there, like you said, it's out there.
Yeah.
Going back to some of the high-profile families that have kids with autism. Again, one of the things we touched on earlier is what circles. How far do we let that out?
Yeah.
Obviously, the nuclear family, the extended family, they know, and maybe they just keep it there. They're able to maintain it. They're able to manage it within that framework, and there's no need for the public or to know. They don't need to know. It's none of their business. A, but B, it's not going to benefit the child or the family in any way. The people who care for the child, the people who give services to the child, the people who are going to help the child, move forward, they know.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that need to know. And again, just trying to keep it within those frameworks is best for the whole family because of their high-profile status that you and I don't have to deal with.
Right.
So looking at how many outer circles do we go to is all dependent on the family and what they want to do. And again, how many groups are they in? Some families we don't know them from TED, and they just have their extended family, and that's as far as they go out. No, but they're not very social. They're not out and about. They're not in the public spotlight. So we wouldn't know them any different than if we saw them at the grocery store. We saw them at line at Disneyland. We don't know.
Right.
And that's and that's okay too. But then there's families who will step on a soapbox and say, hey, this is where I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to help everybody that I can. And if you guys help me, I'll help you. And that's okay too.
You know what I'm really struck by is that as I'm thinking about all the reasons not to disclose publicly, they're all tied to that your child has the potential to be discriminated against, that people who aren't aware will say or do things that are inappropriate, and that kind of ticks me off.
As we know, it's been in the news lately of ignorance and saying things that aren't appropriate. And again, I don't think the intent is to, at least recently, is to discriminate as much as it's what's the word?
Wildly inconsiderate
naive
and ignorant.
ignorant. Right, not knowing that this is going to affect the child in many other families, throughout the world. And I think that's something that's been very difficult when the child is aware of it. To hear these types of things or to see these types of things can be very damaging to the family and to the child. So we have to be not only careful of what's being said, but again, I think sensitivity goes across all, all colors and all religions. It's being sensitive to everybody that we're talking to, and they're no different. And you're right. I mean, there's the opportunity for discrimination that's out there, as it is with all of us, and we have to protect that as much as we can. Going back to what's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah, but there is a part of me that, would like for everybody to grab a big whoopee and get educated. I mean, how long has autism been here? And we're at 1 in 54 boys. Buy a vowel, figure it out, and stop saying stuff that is hurtful and harmful. We have a huge anti-bullying campaign about all kids. When are people going to get it? It just ticks me off.
And I actually am happy that it's out. I mean, it's kind of sad to say this, but I'm happy it's in the news. I'm happy it's in the media, because that
conversation continues.
It needs to get the media attention. The bullying. I mean, let's just stick with bullying, because that's the only way it's going to get resolved. Because everybody sees it, it raises everybody's awareness. Everyone's now more dialed into it. Everyone, more people are protected, more kids are protected, more adults are protected, as you saw by that one crazy one that the bus driver or the bus attendant was getting abused.
Absolutely, but it's, and you see things like that and you think, but it's still happening. It's shocking to all of us, and on the one hand, but we see that it's still happening. And I think that's the frightening thing. And, I think back to very early on when my son was diagnosed with autism. We disclosed at our gym, because we had just joined the gym 2 weeks before he was diagnosed. He was diagnosed the day after we came in, because I was leaving him in the daycare, and we disclosed, and I said, is this going to be a problem? No problem. And then, he'd been there for 2 weeks, was the exact same child he'd been there for 2 weeks, right? And I'd never been called off the floor to deal with any problem whatsoever. And then I was being called every 5 minutes in, well, he did this, or he said that, we don't know what to do. I said, okay, I'll bring in a therapist to help train you people and to bring you up to speed. Well, you can't leave him during this time because we have a college student who doesn't want to, she's frightened by him. He was 2.5, and she was frightened by him. And I said, let me work with this young woman. No, she doesn't even want to talk to you.
Wow.
And then the next month we were kicked out. We were told that our child was no longer welcome there anymore.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, fortunately, that's even changed, because there was just a recent incident in Huntington Beach, California, that was the same thing.
Really?
Almost identical. That they was there, and then he was diagnosed, and after the diagnosis, everyone went hands off, and they suggested that they go to a different gym. And they suggested they look and talk to their lawyers. And of course they backed off. Well, and so they're still there.
And I couldn't go anymore. But
That's terrible.
Afterwards,
that's terrible that they would do that to you.
And what was really terrible is that I knew that there were 3 other families that had kids there, and they had said, you should never have disclosed. We wish you had asked us. We don't disclose. They don't know. We don't tell them, and our child does fine, and there's no big deal. And that was the first time that I went, well, I learned a lesson here.
Well, I mean, to some extent, we bank on compassion. We bank on people being understanding and stepping up and being the better person. The unfortunate thing is there's people out there that aren't. They're not better people, and they won't step up. But again, we live and we learn and we move on. I mean, because there's situations you could probably go to 4 other gyms and everything would be fine.
Yes.
It just happened to be that time there was one person that just wasn't ready for it, and wasn't ready to step up to the challenge, and unfortunately that negatively affected
And I understand that they have changed, that their policy has changed, and I talked to a parent whose child did so wonderfully at that same gym, so I understand that their policy has changed, although they haven't invited us back. What can I say? What can I say? We should take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about teenagers and employment and internships and all of those
jobs.
It's all you hear on the news, right? Jobs down, jobs up, jobs, voting, jobs, right? So we're going to talk about it here with our kids. Stick with us, more with Vince Redmond when we come back. Welcome back to Autism Live. We were just watching that spot about Home Depot, and I was just telling Vince about it. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing that they do on the first Saturday of each month at Home Depot. It's totally free. The kids get to come. They get a kit every month. It's something different, kind of timely. They just did one. There was a moving truck for the month of July.
That's cool.
I don't know what the craft is for August. And the kids get to be there with a parent and work on the craft that's free. They get to socialize with the other kids. Sometimes, like on that one, when we took my son, they were building race cars, and they had the track for the kids to race the cars down.
Those are awesome. Those are fun. That's so fun for them.
And free. And they get to work on social skills, and they get to work on fine motor.
And you can adapt it to what they can do.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Because you can, you know, if you need to hammer the nails, when we took Jem for the first time, he was 3, and he couldn't hammer a nail. And the holes are pre-drilled so that they make it a little bit still. He couldn't do it. But now, you know, he's 9, and he's like, Mom, step back. I'm hammering, and I'm doing it myself. I've got the screwdriver. Where's the paint? I'm, you know, reading the directions. You know,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. And again, we can adapt it to what the child's need is. We can adapt it to what their experience and what their enjoyment level is, and let them have a good time.
Absolutely. And for all those parents out there who say, oh, my child doesn't have any friends, we don't get a chance to socialize, and you don't have the money to do a social skills group. First Saturday every month, you got an automatic social skills group.
Every Home Depot? Or is
every Home Depot.
Wow, okay,
every Home Depot. And then not only that, it's really very clever. They get a free apron that they get to write their name on, so that's very reinforcing. And they get to borrow the hammer, the little hammer. They make their little craft, and you can take it home if it's too much sensory for the kids. There were some Saturdays that we just had to go home because it was too much. But if they stay there and do the craft and finish it, they get a certificate with their name on it, and they get a pin to put on their apron that has a little picture of the craft that they did. So eventually they have an apron covered with pins, and they collect the pins. I wouldn't do that with the really little ones because they're, you know, pins.
They're pins.
But you can save them for when they're a little bit older. Jem now proudly wears the apron with his pins and is totally thrilled. And it's free.
Yeah.
Free.
That's great. That's great. That's good. I'm glad we're advertising that because that's fantastic.
Yes. Because I love it. I'm the biggest fan of that. And then you can buy things at Home Depot while you're there.
You're not just a fan, you're a consumer.
That's right. That's right. I love it. It's done a lot for my son, and they've gotten to know my son over the years, and they greet him, and he's thrilled to be there. And
now I want to go.
I know.
First Saturday of every month?
First Saturday of every month. They just had it last Saturday, and of course the next one will be the first Saturday of August.
Wow. Good to know.
And it's really cool.
Good.
So take the kids.
Yeah, I know my girls would be into it. They're into building and painting and stuff. Yeah.
They got the hammer gene.
They like to create. They got the creative gene. It's definitely not me.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, and building skills is something that's really important for all of our kids because eventually it is the hope for most of us, the vast majority, that our kids are going to have a job, have gainful employment.
Right, some type of employment as they get older.
Right, and I know a lot of families, and I've been talking to a lot of families that, you know, they're in that gap thing right now where it feels like their kids' services have run out, their child is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and they're saying, I don't know what to do. I feel like I've reached the end of the rope. I don't know what's available anymore. We've been talking about some different things like inclusion films. Joey Travolta does that. He does camps and trains kids how to do things within the film industry. But for a lot of people, they say, you know, I'd love for my kid to have a summer job. You know, I'd love for them to have an internship. How do I go about setting my kid up for success in doing this? How can we be preparing kids even when they're younger, and what do we do with those teenagers, Vince? Solve all of our problems.
In 5 minutes, go. Well, again, we start with obviously it's going to vary depending on where the child is or where the teen or young adult, where we are in age, where they are with their level of skills and where their level of abilities are. But there's tons of opportunities out there. You had mentioned during the break, you know, internships, volunteer programs. Those are a great interim step to step into the workforce. And then we can kind of iron out some of the flaws or some of the deficits that might come up with that. How having to follow schedules and how to follow routines and how to follow, different multitasking and those types of things too. And internships and volunteer programs are very easy. Well, not easy, but they're great opportunities for these kids because it slowly integrates them into the workforce so that they can learn how to gain skills. They can learn how to gain their vocational skills and abilities so that when they do enter and actually have a paying job, they'll have those skills and abilities and that self-esteem that goes with it so that they can be successful.
I think that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought about that, honestly, Vince. I mean, it makes so much sense, but starting your kids out with a volunteer job, finding an organization that's meaningful in some way to them. and starting them out, because you're probably going to get people who are going to be a little bit more patient. They're going to have more time to do on-the-job training skills.
Right.
And because somebody has volunteered their time, they are going to take that time.
Right, and you would mention, following their interests. I mean, we have kids or, teens that are working at pet shelters, working at aquatic museums because they love, fish. They love pets, or they're working as interns in restaurants because they love to be, they just love food and they love to be there. And so people are, restaurants and families are taking them in and letting them help and letting them, do things like that. And again, it's experiencing them what's to come, but also it's something that they're interested in, something that they want to, they probably want to stay in.
Absolutely. And then eventually getting into a position where there's an internship.
Right.
And I know, I also do a radio show in addition to this show, and all of our interns on the show are people who are in college and on the spectrum. And it's been a really interesting education for me about how prepared I have to be, because I am, I'm not as prepared as I need to be on a regular basis. But it's been so rewarding having the opportunity to, it's like looking into the future,
right,
as far as I'm concerned, that, everybody is an individual, and I have really learned through this process, because before that I really only knew my child and a couple of other people's children. I really didn't know that many adults that were on the spectrum. And to get an opportunity, and there was only one girl, so I always want to say the young men and the one girl, to get to know them as individuals was quite a privilege.
Good.
And to see what skills they had and try to fit it into what would be useful for us on the radio show. Right. It wasn't always successful, but it...
As with any employee.
Right.
Really, it's not
everything wasn't always a good fit for everybody in terms of their schedule, but it was really rewarding for me. And I have to say that I want to put out to everybody that if you have an opportunity, let's say your child's 4, but you have a business, you have an opportunity as a business owner to put it out there that you would be willing to take an intern. Yeah. In some cases for absolutely no pay, because you're going to have to give a little back. You're going to get some amazing things.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes you're going to get kids that are computer whizzes.
Well, it's funny you brought that up, because I was thinking about that on the drive here today. You had mentioned that we're seeing the wave of the future. This is happening. It's happening on our fingers right now. There's a software company in Fountain Valley, California, that only hires adults that are on the high end of the autism spectrum or Asperger's.
Wow.
Let me tell you why. They're on time.
Right.
They're rule-oriented.
Right.
They're highly focused.
Yeah.
Right?
Skilled.
They're highly skilled, and they're doing what they want to do.
Right.
They're developing software games.
Right.
Right? There's not a lot of social engagement that gets in the way.
Right.
They know what to do.
Right.
And they're hiring specifically, but not only because it's good for their bottom line, and obviously they're getting fantastic games out of it, but these are happy, living adults that are functioning. They're providing.
They're great employees.
They're great employees, but they're content.
Yeah.
They're happy. I mean, they're what there was I forget a politician that said, are these kids, talking about special education, are they going to ever be producing for our community? What are they going to produce for them? Here it is. Yeah. It's right here. And again, the biggest thing for me is, at first you're kind of like, that's kind of, they're only doing this? Why? But when I hear that they're happy and they're content and they love it, they would never want to do anything else, that's all you're asking for.
Yeah.
It helps the employer, it helps us as the commerce, and it's helping them be able to feel included. It's helping them be able to fill their lives. It's filling their lives up, and it's making them feel content, and it's fantastic.
And I think it's great, when we look at our kids and think, okay, so what are their skill sets? What are they really good at? Is there a way that this can be utilized? I had a mom.
How do we use that? Right.
Yeah. I had a mom recently who said, my son is 17 and I want him to have a summer job, but I just don't, I can't just send him off to get a fast food job. He's not going to excel at that. And I said, well, what is he good at? And she said, well, you know what? I can send him up to clean his room and he'll take all day to do it. He's slow at it, but he is so meticulous that everything is completely organized when he is done and completely dusted from top to bottom. And I said, wow, I would think that there's somebody out there that could use that service who isn't going to care if it takes all day, who'd be willing.
We've seen some offices in this building.
Yeah. Yes,
have him come over.
I
He can come
know.
here.
They could use that kind of thing, and then
Absolutely.
as a parent, you've got to, advocate for your child, and and I said, be creative,
Make
put
a
it
niche.
out there,
Make it.
make a niche, and even if you have to say, okay, you're going to try it out on a trial basis, and say, to an office that my son is going to come in and clean at 6:00 at night when nobody is there, and you don't care when he leaves,
Right.
and we're going to try it out for 2 days,
Right.
and if you like it, then you're going to pay this, but for 2 days we're going to do it for free. See if the child has the ability to persevere, or if it's just a one-day kind of thing.
Right. Right. And you see that all the time. I mean, you see it on the news. You see, people who are, the organizers, or
Yes.
the closet consultants, and
Right.
they come up with some creative names. And really, all they are is just people who are organized.
Right.
They come, they organize.
love it.
They can,
Right.
put things in right places, and you're like, oh, it
That
cleans up
works.
your clutter.
Right.
Why can't we make that niche? Why,
Yeah.
and I think that's fantastic that you talked to her about that, because that's what we can do. We can find things that out there and make it productive. It could be, again, it could start as a volunteer. It could start as an internship, like you had mentioned, and let's see if it works. But why not? Because it's out there. It could be in janitorial services, or it could just be, this is a person who will help you organize. They'll come in, they'll organize your office in 2 days. You pay them whatever, and you're done.
Right.
I mean, it's a part-time gig.
Yeah.
But this is what they do, and they go around and help organize all the
Right.
offices. And to be honest with you, I think that there's a ton of people that could be successful for.
We all know somebody.
On
I
both,
have a garage.
Right, both on the receiving end and both on the giving end.
Yes, I have a
For
garage
sure.
that needs to be organized in the worst possible way.
But niches, I think that's important to bring up, because you're looking at what the kids can do and how they can be successful. Sometimes it might be creating something, creating a job, or creating opportunities, and sometimes it's just picking the right job. It's picking.
Absolutely.
I have one one of my boys now is late teens, and he works at a grocery store, and he knows how to bag. He knows how to do his stuff. He's been told the rules. He knows how to do it. He's got his speed going. He's great. He's a great employee, and he likes it.
Yeah.
And that's
Gotta
great.
love
That's
that.
all he needs to do is he
Right.
goes, he's pleasant, he enjoys it, he enjoys what he does, he knows the routines, he knows when to get the carts, he knows when to restock, he knows all that kind of stuff. And you know what? He's producing. They love him because he's efficient. He loves it because he's wanted.
Yeah.
That's all you can ask for.
There's a young man at one of our local grocery stores that it's not autism, but there's clearly differently abled. And I remember when he started working there when he was like 17, and somebody was just a little patient and outlined everything. He's now an assistant manager.
Yeah.
He is so good at that job. And I know when I come into the grocery store, if he sees that there's more than 4 people in a lane, he's got another register open. He memorizes all these different things in the store, upsells constantly. Everybody's thrilled to see him.
Right.
He just is a go-getter, and I think he's going to go on to be the manager of a store and do really well, because he has found something that he's really good at, and somebody was patient with him in the beginning.
It's the perfect example of what you said, differently abled. We're using their abilities and making it successful.
Yeah.
Everybody's differently abled. You, me, our children, they're all differently abled. And it's finding their abilities and making those successful. He can memorize things. He has that memory and knows the rules and follows rules and follows structure like no other. Now when things go chaotic, maybe that's harder for him. But that doesn't happen very often, so he uses his abilities to make his niche for him. And that's fantastic.
It's really inspirational. But I think the key is, as parents, to advocate for our kids and to let other people know it when your child, look at what your child is good at, help them to make the niche, and let other people know. Let your family and friends and business owners know that your child is available for that. And if you have a business or something that you need help with, consider putting it out there, because you could benefit greatly from having somebody and know that at the end of the day you made a difference for somebody and help them make their way into the job market. It's a wonderful thing.
And there's tons of opportunities out there, even working at the local library to working at gas stations to working, supermarkets, restaurants, pet stores. I mean, everybody can use an extra hand.
And it's never too young, really, to have them volunteer in some way.
Depending on what their abilities are. Yeah, absolutely.
That's something I really hadn't thought about, that I got to get my son volunteering for somebody. That's a great idea, Vince. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us. I always appreciate it when you come by. It's always a treat. And we'll look forward to hearing more about what's going on with you and how you are helping to better serve families here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
Absolutely.
I know you do a great job.
And as soon as we can get that off the ground, we'll be in here promoting it.
Yes, absolutely. We'll look forward to hearing about that.